prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God unto a perfect or mature man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men, and cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. But speaking the truth in love, we would grow up into Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplies, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. Verse 17, this I say therefore and testify, meaning he's saying this is your testimony now. This is the witness before mankind in the Lord, meaning that my life is now in the Lord. That you henceforth not walk not as other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who are now past feeling, in other words, they're numb, and have given themselves over to lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness, as we looked in then last week. But you have not so learned Christ, meaning this is not how you learned Him. You didn't try to figure Him out and take information and make your own assessments of it. We'll get to that in a second. Verse 21 then. If so be, or the word since you have heard Him and have been taught by Him, as the truth is in Jesus. The word, as we looked at last week, the word learned, means that it's defined by this growing understanding of knowledge. Okay, knowledge was presented, but it was presented as information. And now I need to use that knowledge, and it needs to be practiced. Whatever I've been taught needs to be practiced out. We talked about the idea that it's a hands-on experience. It's an active learning. And Paul says that's how you get to know Christ. You are not going to know Christ by some academic pursuit of learning all the facts about Him or the information about Him, because the problem is in verses preceding, you'll take your own interpretation of who He is, and that will be your version of Christ. But verse 21 says, if you've really been taught by Him, if you've heard Him and have been taught by Him, then you will know the only place to find truth is in Him. Not in my perception of who He is, not in taking information and trying to figure Him out, but by actively hands-on experiencing my Creator, the Savior of the world. That's when I get to learn Him. Now, in looking at these verses, there's plenty of cross-references, but I think I would at least like to start here in a dialogue between Jesus Himself and Pontius Pilate. So let's go ahead and take a look at John chapter 18. John has some fantastic statements, and yet really, for the most part, this is where I want to start. John chapter 18. We're going to look at start in verse 33, all the way through verse 38. You see, this dialogue is potentially a dialogue that every single human being is going to have to face. They're at some point going to have to ask the question that Pilate asks in verse 38. But let's read up to that point. You know the situation. Christ has been arrested. He's been brought before Pilate. Pilate says, I don't want to deal with him. Send him to Caiaphas. Or send him over here. Send him over here. I just figure it out, you guys. I don't want to have to deal with this. And yet the fact is Christ, through all those situations, is brought right before Pilate. Once again, you can say you don't want to deal with trying to figure out what is the truth or who is this Jesus, but the fact is every single individual that was ever created is going to have to come to this situation. You can push it off, you can say it's somebody else's business, but you're going to have to ask the same question that Pilate asks in verse 38. So, starting in verse 33, it says, Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus and said unto him, Are you the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, saying, Are you saying this thing of your own self, or did others tell it to you of me? Am I on? No. Did you lose me? Okay. Then we'll use this. Am I coming through the speakers? Okay, good. All right. What if I whisper? Okay. How about this? Let's do the hand mic anyways. Okay. Just to make sure. Because there again, to me, I can hear myself now. So he says, Pilate asks, Are you the King of the Jews? Jesus says, Are you asking me because you're thinking of this yourself? Or did others tell you that I was the King of the Jews? In other words, you've seen my active ministry, only 3 years, but the fact is, did you see it for yourself, or is this somebody else asking these questions and you're just the actual voice? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? In other words, he's saying, I'm not asking this for myself. I'm asking it because that's what everybody else is asking, and I'm the governor here, and I'm trying to figure this out, so I might as well ask the question. But Jesus is pressing the point, saying, You need to ask that question. Pilate answers once again, Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you unto me. What have you done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered unto the Jews. But now is my kingdom is not from this point on. Pilate therefore said to him, So are you a king then? I mean, can you imagine? Christ is trying to probe deep to Pilate, and Pilate's going, Enough of this, I just want surface. Surface, are you a king or are you not? Because I need to know, because I got to make a decision here, so let's get on with this. And Jesus is pressing. Are you really seeking if I'm a king or not? Pilate says to him, So are you a king then or not? Jesus answered, You say that I am a king, and to this end, yes, I was born. And for this cause I did come into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth will hear my voice. And here goes Pilate. Pilate says to him, What is truth? Now, reading that, we don't know if he's saying that sarcastically, or if he's saying that because he honestly has been pondering that question. But he doesn't say anything more, or at least it's not recorded. Then he goes on his business. But he says, What is truth? Jesus, you are talking about truth. But really, let's be honest. What is truth? So I started from there, and I started doing some research, and I was really shocked. There is, according to multiple sources, there is no more difficult or controversial word to define in all of human existence than truth. Truth, somehow, has been the great mystery of all humanity. That if you come up with a definition or someone else comes up with a definition, it's always been debatable, and nobody can really, for all humanity, agree on that. That was interesting to me. Because once again, no matter who you are, you'll have to come to some sort of conclusion. What is truth? Your time on earth, you're looking at all the things that you deal with on a daily basis, you're going to be faced with that question. What is truth? And here Jesus is saying, if you knew truth, you would hear my voice. From that point on, I wanted to just take a little bit of a standpoint, maybe outside the walls of church, and just talk a little bit. Because when you start asking the question, what is truth? I don't know about you, maybe a show of hands. Who here has taken a philosophy class? Philosophy class, okay? Now, I don't know about you, I like to learn. Philosophy class oftentimes left me with confusion and a headache, okay? No other class has ever done that to me, but philosophy class did. And I had a really good professor, and he went slow. But the fact is philosophy just made my head spin. So I don't want that to be the case when we leave today. So let's just define it in simple terms. Philosophy says all humans have a desire to know what the truth is. There again, Pilate asked, what is truth? Whether he was serious or not, the fact is that he has to come to that conclusion. The Roman Empire was filled with all these people, as far as being influenced by the Greeks, to know what is the truth. And everybody sat around, and once again, I said it earlier, is they said, well, if we just knew the Logos would be the key to understanding what is truth. So philosophy says all humans desire to know the truth. Philosophy then says, here's the mode that we're going to use. We are going to use wisdom in an everyday, practical, and meaningful way. We're going to use that wisdom to find the truth. So philosophy can agree that we're going to use wisdom. There's information, and we can look at that. And truth it needs to be everyday, meaningful, and practical. But truth is knowable, philosophy says. Problem is philosophy in no way, shape, or form ever agrees on, number one, how to gain that wisdom, and then how to use that wisdom to find the truth. So philosophy is just page after page after page of trying to find truth in multiple different ways, and everybody with different angles and different conclusions. But the fact remains, all humans are asking, what is truth? Okay? I wanted to do something quick here. I don't know if it'll be fun for you or not, but I want to just show you a couple different things. And I'm going to start with a magic trick that I used to do. I often didn't get too distracted in class, but if you take a pencil and you kind of go like this and then up and down, it kind of makes your pencil look like it wiggles a little bit, like there's some sort of flexibility in that, like this is a rubber pen. And you can say, hey, wow, that looks like it's kind of jiggling a little bit. But the fact is it's completely solid. There's nothing there. I can't bend it at all. And so philosophy would say, what you see or perceive is not necessarily going to tell you what the truth is, because in this case, your eyes can deceive you. Or Brandon and I were doing this little thing this morning. You can put it in a glass, and if I hold it up to you, you can say, oh, it bends, and the bottom part is thicker than the top part. And the fact is no, it's not. But the whole point of that type of demonstration, and really, if you sat in philosophy class, they would spend hours looking at this and going, what do you see? Okay? But that's what philosophy does, is it contemplates what is the truth and says, how can we find that? And everybody has their examples, and we all agree, that's your opinion, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. Okay, and so there's this philosophy. Now, that philosophy, each era tends to have its own philosophy. The philosophy that we live under, even though we can agree that, hey, what I see certainly looks like the truth, but just because I see it doesn't mean it's the truth. In other words, many things look like the truth, but just the fact that you think they look like the truth does not make them true. Once again, that would be a statement in philosophy that kind of make your head start to spin. The philosophy that we live under in this day and age is called postmodernism. I don't know if you've heard that term or what. It's been around for a little while, but in the late 20th century and the 21st century, postmodernism rules. And so I looked it up. And, you can look at Wikipedia and there's different thoughts. But I went to kind of a school of thought, which is just PBS, public broadcasting. And they have their definition of postmodernism. And I thought it was really telling. And so I want to read part of this, okay? Postmodernism is largely a reaction to the assumed certainty. In other words, there used to be assumed certainty. Postmodernism is the reaction that there was an assumed certainty that would stem from a recognition that there is reality. Okay? We used to say, you can know reality. You can know truth. Postmodernism says, not so fast. Not so fast. The school of thought before, or the pervading, what we would call absolute truths, means there is one set standard. Postmodernism says there is one set standard to you, but not to me. Now we can look at that and say, well, that's absurd. That's nonsense. That's the philosophy we currently live in. Okay, let's keep on going. Okay. In the postmodern understanding, interpretation is everything. Let me read that again. In the postmodern understanding, what you interpret is everything, meaning what you interpret, that's the truth. Doesn't matter what you're looking at, you can interpret and say, that thing in there, that's bent. It's not. Doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter if I could pull it out and show you something different. I see it as bent, and therefore it is bent. And that is truth, and you cannot say anything about it. That's postmodern thinking. Okay, and that's the pervading philosophy that we live in. Okay, let's keep on going. Postmodernism is post, or that term is added, because it denies the existence of any absolute truths. And it lacks any optimism for things that can be scientifically proven, philosophically explained, or any religious truth that will explain anything that would be all-inclusive for everybody. So once again, it says it denies absolute truth, and it will reject if there is a truth that is all-encompassing for everybody. It says absolutely not. And in the postmodern thinking that we could look at, and maybe it's because we don't sit in universities or under some of that school of thought, but it's so pervading that if you speak up against it, you are absolutely ridiculed. You cannot say anything absolute. Okay? And that's the world that we live in. In other words, what that's called is the quote-unquote, even PBS says it, that's the modern mind. We have modern minds now. We think for ourselves. We don't need absolutes. Okay? So, interesting. Back to the question, what is truth? Postmodernism would say, whatever you want it to be. If it looks good to you, it's true to you. We call that relative truth instead of absolute truth. And they would say, you can't say absolute truth anymore because it doesn't exist. Okay? And even if you could prove something scientifically, they would be skeptical about it, thinking somewhere, somehow there's a different angle to look at this that will disprove your absolute truth. Okay? So it's big time. And really, once again, it's the main term that all humanity has always struggled defining to try to come up with a consistent answer that we would all accept. Okay? It's no wonder then when we read in Romans chapter 1 that it would say they refused to hear the truth and exchanged it for a lie because it felt better to them. The lie felt better to them. And they rejected all truth and anything that would point to that. Okay? So, back to Ephesians. And you can just keep a finger in John, because we're going to do some more cross-referencing in John. But in Ephesians then, it says, verse 21, you have learned from Christ, verse 20, since you have heard him. The word heard him means that you have seen the evidence and you've contemplated, and you have actually come up with an opinion. In this case, the readers would say, I've experienced Christ. He's shown me something that I can't deny. Okay? So he's saying you've heard that, and you've been taught by him. The word taught is once again to learn from somebody else. But in this case, the word learn is in the verse before, in verse 20. It's that hands-on experience. That even though postmodernism or any philosophy would say you can't know truth, I have experienced something. Pilate, in talking with Jesus, experienced something. He didn't know what it was. But his only reaction was to say, I don't know how to deal with this. Hands off. Pontius Pilate was a cruel, unrelenting governor. He was not the emperor. He was trying to impress the emperor who was in Rome. And he did that by saying, wherever you want to bring me, and he brings him to Jerusalem. And he's, no, not Jerusalem. I don't want to deal with all that pressure. It was the last place Pontius Pilate would want to go, but he, of course, wants to be next in line to be emperor, so he'll do whatever the emperor says. And here he is faced with something that he says, I don't want to deal with this. Emperor thing or not, this is too much for me to try to handle with the way I perceive things. I need to wash my hands of this. And you can see it does not matter. Even when he says to the crowd, what do I do about this? They say, crucify him. And the only thing he can do is say, I guess that's what we have to do. But I am so uneasy about facing this truth, this person who is truth, that it is just crushing me. My wife's having nightmares over this. I don't know how to deal with it. What is this? What is truth? Okay? Truth, as defined by at least the Greek word that we see in verse 21, where it says we've been taught by him, and the truth is in Jesus, goes starkly in the face of postmodernism. Here is the definition for the Greek word of truth. It is an unconcealed, in other words, plain to see reality. That's the definition of truth. Plain to see. Nothing concealed about it. Right in your face. Plain to see. Not only that, it's constant. It will never change. It does not matter your interpretation of it. It's never changing. It will always stay the same. Webster's dictionary then defines truth by saying this. Truth is faithfulness to an original standard or an original measurement. So whatever that original standard was or the original measurement, anything has to bounce off of that. Webster's dictionary says, you can't have truth if you're not going to have an absolute. It's an original standard. And once again, it does not, you can try to twist the standard or do whatever you want to do with the standard, but the original standard is what it is, and it will never change. Part of that original standard would be that if the floor was true or something was true in construction or anything like that, it would be that it is the original design. It's the real thing. Okay? Whatever purpose it was created for, it does that purpose. It's true. Okay? So once again, Pilate has to deal with this. Now we have a fairly clear understanding, and that verse there says it. The truth is in Jesus. The word in is that little en, which means it dwells in Jesus. It is who Jesus is. Now John, we'll take a little jaunt through the Gospel of John here. You guys know all these verses, and yet for the most part, I think it's good for us to review. So, John, we'll go right to chapter 1. John chapter 1. Starting verse 14. We'll read verses 14 through 18 here. All right, John chapter 1, starting verse 14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten, or the only one birthed of the Father, full of grace and truth. Here's the word full. The word full. Let me make sure I found it. The complete perfection of, in this case, grace and truth. Grace meaning the merciful kindness that I could actually be in God's presence. That He allows me to actually experience who He is, His intervening with me. That's grace. He is the complete perfection of my interaction with who God is. And He is the complete perfection of truth, an unveiled, plain-to-see reality. I get to see God. I see God and I get to experience Him. That's what that phrase means, full of grace and truth. Okay, continuing on, verse 15. John bore witness of Him and cried, saying, This was He of whom I spoke. John the Baptist, that is. He that comes after me is preferred before me, for He was before me, meaning He existed before me. Verse 16. And of His fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. Verse 17, for the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. The word came means that it was existed out of a person. In other words, truth wasn't something that it took a little bit here and it took a little bit there, and we put some things together and mixed it all up, and we have truth. Truth was an extension of Jesus Christ. It's an extension of who He is. Truth is a person. In other words, Pilate's statement could have been said not what is truth, but who is truth. And he would be more accurate in that. It was an extension of who He is. Okay? Other verses, chapter 8, John chapter 8, verses 31. Once again, verses that we've heard, but I want to make sure that this is all-encompassing. When we ask this question, what is truth? And the world says you cannot know it, and if you did know it, you cannot say it, because it might be different from what other people see. That doesn't change what is truth. Chapter 8, starting in verse, where are we going? Verse 31. Okay? Then Jesus said to those Jews which believed on Him, If you continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Okay? We've heard that. However, in His statement, let's go a few more verses down. Verse 33. They answered Him, We are Abraham's seed, and we were never in bondage to any man. In other words, what do you mean free? We were never in bondage. How can you say that you would make us free? Jesus answered them, Truly, truly, I say unto you, whoever has committed sin is a servant of sin. In other words, you're in bondage to sin. And the servant would abide not in the house forever, but the Son abideth forever. Verse 36 then, If the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. In other words, He's saying, I am the truth. The Son will set you free. The truth will set you free. I am the truth. They're grappling with that, just like Pilate, just like the disciples. What is this? We don't understand. And He says, you need to know me. Not a concept, not information. You need to know me. It's just like in verse 20 of Ephesians. We don't learn because we have information. We learn because that becomes our experience. And it's confirmed that what we have learned, we know because we've had that. Nobody can take that away from me. I'm convinced. And he says, that's how you're going to know me. Not because you come to church and hear some things, not because you read a book and you hear some things, not because you can even read the Bible and learn some things. You need to know me. Okay? Last one in John. John 14. John chapter 14. Starting in verse 1. We'll go through verse 6. Once again, you've heard it. John 14, starting in verse 1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me also. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, you will be there also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Can you imagine him saying that? That would be as if, once again, in Thomas, of course, then in the next verse, speaks plainly. Thomas said to him, we do not know where you go and the way that you came. And he says, I am that way. I am the truth. I am that life, and no man can come to the Father except through me. Jesus asked these questions and did the same thing to Pilate, where he says, those who really want to know truth will listen to my voice. And he's going, what is truth? He says to the disciples, you know where I came, and you know the way where I'm going to go. And they're going, no, we don't. What is he getting at? He's saying, I don't need to teach you all the details. You need to experience me as a person. I could sit here and give all details till my face turns blue. It does not change the fact that you will not actually know, experience, comprehend the truth until you embrace Christ, who he is. Truth is simply an extension out of who he is. All right, so let's go back then. If then the Greek term says truth is plain to see, it's unconcealed, that means, and John says truth is not a what is it, it's a who is it. And the world continues to say, you can't know what it is, and don't you dare say it's a who it is, because we'll get upset with that. Because you'll offend somebody. We'll find somebody that offends, and therefore if you do that, you can't do that. With our modern mind, we won't allow it. Once again, in Romans chapter 1, it says, starting in verse 18, they exchanged truth for a lie. They didn't want to hear it. Part of me asks, how did we get to a place where there's no absolutes? What nonsense is that? And yet if you said that out loud, you would be so ridiculed. The fact is that they have exchanged truth for a lie, and for thousands of years have never been able to find the truth because they refuse to accept what the truth actually is. Philosophy, through any sort of pursuits, they will never find the truth if they don't embrace the person of who truth actually really is. And if you said that once again, that would cause people to become quite upset. But an absolute truth is, it doesn't change if you get upset or not. It doesn't change how you interpret that. The truth is an original standard. It didn't start with me and my conclusion that I came up with. It started with a person who, by the way, never started. It started with the creator of It has always been there, and not only that, despite what they say, it is plain to see. It is so plain to see that a knee-jerk reaction says, no, I will not see that, I will not tolerate that, and I will not let anybody else tolerate that as well. We've talked a little bit this morning in Sunday school about parable of the seeds and the seed that gets sown and the thorns come and choke it out. That's this picture, that the prevailing thoughts of all society would say, you cannot, we're going to choke the life out of you if you say that truth is an absolute and that truth cannot be defined by anything other than the person of Christ. They would say that because it's offensive, we're going to choke that out of you. That's the world that we live in. But never has there ever been a time in all of humanity when humanity needs to know what is actually the truth. And they don't need to hear it anymore by verbal. They don't need to get a copy of what I'm saying right now. A copy of what I'm saying right now is not going to change anything. It's going to irritate them all the more. Because they've exchanged and they said, that's not what we're going to buy into. Christ shows, and Paul says it in our passage in Ephesians, as to how they actually are going to then know the truth. Okay? Let's go back into verse 20, Ephesians 4, verse 20. It says, but you have not so learned Christ. And once again, you have not learned him by information. Information was part of it, but information couldn't alone bring you to Christ. You had to realize he is real and there is something that is grabbing me, pulling me, aching from within, longing for who he is. And information can maybe bring you up to the doorway, but it will not pull you through. You have to decide, am I going to take information or am I going to exchange it with a lie? Because the real deal here is, if I accept the truth, it's going to cause a radical change. There's going to be a change that rocks the foundation of how I've lived my life, how I have perceived things, how I have experienced life. It's going to change everything. Whether that's scary or whether they say, hey, I don't want that because I feel real secure in my other way. The fact is truth is going to cause change. Verse 20 says, you have not so learned Christ, you've experienced him. If so be, or since you have heard him and been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus. Here then in the next verses is that truth. Once again, in the person. You put off concerning that former old man that you used to be, which is corrupt according to its deceitful lusts. You will be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and you will be able to put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. The truth is, God came to do a radical change in who you are, to cause a death of how you used to be and a new creation that can only be lived by the one who creates. It can only be the one lived by the one who is truth. You see, he says, I want the world to know truth, but the only way they're going to know it is if they see me extending myself through you. You're the vessel. You're the witness. You're the testimony. And he says even in verse 17, here's our testimony. This is what it is. My question to us as Christians then is, number one, has there been a radical change? Have you come to know Christ? Is your understanding of Christ still an intellectual one that says, I know his attributes, I know he's love, I know I'm supposed to try to do some of these things, I know that he died for me, helps me feel good, at least when I walk into the building. Is that your definition of coming to Christ? Because that's not what Paul says. Paul says, here's what it is to learn Christ. you have experienced being crucified with Christ, and that you have been experienced being raised to a new life where you can say, something has radically changed here, folks. That I don't know if I can explain it, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life learning what has just happened to me. It's not just that I don't have any issues anymore. It's just that somehow these issues are being taken care of, and I can learn to let go of these things. I don't have to fix them. Somebody else has fixed them, but he needs to show me how to let go. There needs to be some cooperation, some participation jointly to say, I don't know what just happened. Something radical, though, happened. And the world will stand back and say, with our modern minds, we say, that can't happen. And you can say what you will, but it did. And so I'll just live my life letting Him live this truth through me. I'll let Him guide me. I'll let that life be the extension. And you guys will just have to sit and watch. And as much as you want to say, no, that can't happen. No, that's not the truth because it offends me or it just doesn't go with how I see things. The fact is Paul is saying, that won't change the truth. And he's saying you don't need to come with fancy words. You don't need to come with trying to push an agenda on anybody. All you need to do is let that experience be your experience. You've been crucified with Christ, raised to a new life, and the radical change will take care of itself. You'll be drawn into seeking more of who He is, and the world around you will go, what happened to you? Or what is this? And you, just like Pilate, can say, oh, are you asking what is truth? Because you may have a different definition, but I will invite you in to just watch. Something has happened within me, and let's just watch together. I don't know about you. My biggest concern with Christianity, and this is my concern, and then I ran into somebody else who was a famous author, and it was his concern. I'm like, oh, you took my concern. But Ravi Zacharias, if people are familiar with him, I just really enjoy listening to him, reading his stuff. He's from India, just very brilliant apologist, highly encouraged. Listen to his stuff. He said, and it was my concern, but I'll quote him instead, his biggest concern is that somehow there are Christians walking around who have not been radically changed. He said, the defining mark of Christianity is that we were crucified and raised to new life. And he just said, my concern is if we are to be the witness of that truth being extended, if that's the only way that the world is going to know truth, then how is that possibly not transforming people who say they're Christians? I think that's a good question. And yet the fact is that's not a condemning question. That's a convicting question that says, have I learned Christ by hands-on experience, or has it just been academic knowledge? Have I read enough books, or even, once again, the Bible, to learn things about Him, but have I experienced that? That goes back to the two questions that Linda was referring to from last week. I've heard this, but have I experienced it? Is that my experience? Because if it is my experience, then that has probably changed something from within. And if it did change something, then that means it's evident to other people. Whether they look at it or not, whether they want to see it or not, it's not up to me. I don't have to push it on anybody. He just says He wants to extend Himself, His life through me. And that through the walking out of, as verse 1 in chapter 4 says, walk daily then, being this is your testimony. Walk daily with Him, using all opportunities to show you how that He has brought you to be a new creation. And in fact, verse 23
smack in the middle of this, put off concerning the former man, or put on the new man, is verse 23. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And once again, we'll look at these in more depth. The word renewed means be continuously reminded or confirmed that you indeed are a new creation. And he's saying, let every day, let God living within you reveal, I'm a new creation. I'm a new creation. There's been a radical change. And that's how you learn him. That's the hands-on experience. And as a result, then the world will come to realize, man, there is this constant that is within this person or these people. There's a constant. I thought the philosophy in this day and age was that there was no constants. There's no absolutes. But they're showing something different. That's the only way that mindset will change. Because that mindset, as skeptical as it is, says, if we see enough evidence, we may start to say, okay, that might have to be truth. They're skeptical of scientific investigation, of philosophy or religious thoughts. But if they saw the evidence, postmodernism by definition will have to change if they see enough evidence. So amazing to me. And he says, this is how I'm going to do it. But you need to learn of me, hands-on experiencing me. I will confirm you are a new creation. But that is going to have to be extended through you. And it's not because you are trying to do it. It's because you have come to know who I am by experience. And the world will be forced to change. Not because of persuasive arguments. Not because of, here's a whole new mindset. They will be forced to say, there is absolutes after all. There is a standard. What is truth? They'll come back to that, realizing, haven't we struggled with this question for thousands of years? And everybody would agree, yes, yes, yes. And they would say, what evidence shows us that there could be some absolutes? And the fact is, they would say, there's this evidence. Jesus living his life in and through millions of people, and we simply can't deny it anymore. We have to deal with that. Just like Pilate. You can't push that off anymore. You'll have to deal with it. And he says, that's the evangelical message. That's the one that is going to reach them, is they will be forced to say, can't deny it. There's a change in these people. What is that? That is a person that lives within. Powerful message. We'll get into the details into verse 22, 23, 24 of what that looks like. Because frankly, I can't figure that out with my mind. He says, you got to learn it by experience. But guess what? God knew that, and he says, that's exactly the purpose that I had all along, was for you to learn it by that way. You see, the fact is truth will bring a radical change, and it will set you free. The postmodern mind would say, I am already set free. I don't have any standards that I have to live by. But the fact is, and they would claim that as a truth, which is self-defeating to say, you just claimed a truth when you said there are no truths. And that's how that philosophy goes. The radical change that happens within a person when they come to know Christ doesn't mean that it's instantaneous. Don't fool ourselves. It's not instantaneous in the fact that I have no more issues. This is great. The fact is that you can say, something has happened. I have had an experience with God that I can't explain, and I will spend the rest of my life figuring out or learning, or in this case, letting him teach me what that is. And the world will stand by as an audience going, I guess we're waiting to see as well. It's a cause for a focus and an understanding. You are my life. I've been crucified. You are my life. And you want to confirm that daily, every day in my walk. So I'll let you. I'll wake up in the morning knowing that this is the goal. This is the purpose. This is the way that the world will know. This is the way that I will know. I'll be solid in my conviction of faith. And once again, James says, I birthed that truth in you to be the evidence, the first fruits to the rest of the world. That's what you have inside. Questions? Thoughts? Yes, Linda.
Well, I was just thinking that the truth needs no defense. And when you're talking about, we don't, sometimes in our zeal, we want to, go out and kind of pound somebody with the truth as opposed to the lies that they're speaking. You just kind of want to, but the truth doesn't need any defending. And the wisdom in what you're teaching today is in the walking in love. That's the godly wisdom, walking in love and letting them see the truth, sometimes without even having to speak a word. And that deflects, because the enemy would rather have you go out and, no, this is the truth. And that causes the conflict, and that just seems to make things worse, and they're not hearing it anyway.
Yeah.
They've already got their mind made up. But when you walk out in love and show them the truth, just by who you are, not trying to do anything other than be what Christ is, doing in you, then, you don't have to defend it. It's just there, and they will see it.
Yeah. I was doing a little research with C.S. Lewis. He's one that, when asking these questions, he comes up. I can't remember if it was him or if it was a quote from him, but I read it in his works. The world will hear the gospel message through 5 different things: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Christian. And the world typically will never read the first 4. Well, I thought, wow, that's insightful. We've quoted before, Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel always. Use words only when necessary, though. And you can recognize that this is a life that lives out of me. It's not a mindset. It's not a philosophy. It's a life. And the truth is an extension of that life. But once again, have I let that life radically change who I am so it can be evident to me and those around me? Roger?
I'd just like to read New American Standard, verse 24. Out of the New American Standard. And put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. It's like righteousness and holiness are coming out of the person of Jesus Christ. So we are created in that likeness.
And if you do cross-referencing with the word truth, it's typically the flip side is the word unrighteousness. So, did you have something?
Yeah. Well, so many things are going through my mind, but one was just that when I read this word lately, it's just like there's always a warning on every page. It isn't like, just the gushy stuff and the stuff. It's like there's a warning on every page. And I had a fear, actually, when my sons decided to go to college. And I didn't have the fear so much of the world, but I had a fear of the philosophers and the professors there that were going to introduce them to a bunch of crap, And so I just had to rest and pray to God that, that they would stand in what they knew and they experienced. These young men experienced Christ. They just didn't know of Him. So I could rest in that. But I know he speaks in Colossians 2 when we talk about, the cross references and so much alike between Ephesians and that, when we started off, we were talking about this battle between the flesh and the spirit, and that's where this whole thing is always going to. But he says in Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, he says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit." And it's after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. He's pretty plain and he's pretty clear about these things. And over on the next page it says, "Let no man beguile you." It's what even the believers do. Us guys put our own reasoning and understanding instead of doing what you're saying is go to Christ. And even when we talk about the perfecting of the saints for the work of the ministry, there's not enough pastors, teachers, evangelists, prophets, and apostles to do the work of what we talked about this morning. It has to be the Spirit of Christ that is 24/7 that we have to direct somebody to.
Maybe we'll close with this. Oh, go ahead, Mary. I'll bring this to you just so we can hear you.
Well, the first thing, it's just a small thing to say about the philosophy is I think the only good thing I got out of that is learning that there are other people, being compassionate towards other ideas of way to look at things, and not pushing what religion set aside or God set aside, without being pushy on my opinions. That's the one thing I took out of that. But and to learn that there's other ways of looking at things, at the world. But one thing I want to ask or say is, when there's a transformation that takes place, with us, is it possible, or if that happens with every Christian, through him and done in him, is it possible that in all these different churches, all these different religions of this world, of this country, I'm saying, the transformation will take place, but then that's what it talks about in the Bible as far as being careful of the wolves in sheep's clothing, and is it possible that they have a transformation, an initial transformation, but yet still succumb to evil, to whatever in them is not weak, but for lack of a better word, weak or something? Is that why there are Christians who, they call themselves evil, or other people see them people as evil and give Christians a bad name because they're doing things in the name of God, but yet it's not a very godly way to act. I don't know.
Well, let me answer the first question is, other ways to see things. There again, I can recognize that people have other ways to see things. But I need to recognize that if there's truth and there's another way to look at it, then by definition that is not true. And I can be compassionate with that perspective, but I'm also not going to be bending. And as a result, if they truly want to, once again, their viewpoint has to bounce off what is extended out of me. That's what I always concentrate on. What's this life? I want that to be manifest, because I don't say the right words. I don't have the right persuasion, but they have to ask questions if they see something contrary from what they see be played out in a Christian. They'll eventually ask that question. And I've really been amazed that that's happened. That I've been asked that question a few times. at first I was kind of scared off by it, but then I realized, let's check what you are. Let's check your perspective, and I'll explain mine, and we'll check yours, and we'll see where the differences are, and then that person can say, you take the differences that you see and you ask those questions yourselves. And so that's the first thing that I do with that, is even I'm compassionate to their other perspectives, and yet I realize that if it's contrary to what I know is truth, then say, hey, you're living a lie. But the fact is I'll let the life who lives within me reveal that to them. And that's what the Beatitudes say. They're not going to accept that lightly. They'll be very, very upset, and they will persecute because they realize in that light something is awry in the way that they do things. Number two, it depends on kind of the situation that you're referring to, but I would just point back to what we described in Sunday school this morning about the seed being choked. That seed very much is a Christian, but they are so embraced or engulfed by everything else in the world, and let's just say postmodern thinking, that tries to rob them. You're not a new creation. You can't live that. That's not real because we said so, or that's not the era we live in. And I just think that has invaded Christianity as a whole. That may be an answer to Ravi Zacharias' question. Why is that happen? Is because we've bought into it, just what Glenn has said, or the warning that's in verse 14 here that says, or verse 13 that says, I want you to become a perfect man and experience the fullness of who Christ is, so that you are not children anymore and you won't be tossed to and fro by these doctrines of men. It is that's all of Scripture is saying. We need to grow. Let truth have its work because it's going to cause us to grow. And in that growing process, we'll start to see the truth separate in between. And yet the world is going to take a snapshot photo and say, all-encompassing, if that's it, then that's all of Christianity. And they can say that, and there's nothing I would say that's going to change their mind. But that is that first, I'm going to just exchange this for a lie. Because if I looked any deeper, I would have to change. And I don't want to change, and I'm not going to let you change me. And so my heart's cry is to say to all Christianity, let truth have its work. Let it confirm that you are a new creation. And any philosophies that are trying to come around and choke that out, let God be that life that He can teach you, that you don't have to come to me, or you don't even have to come to somebody who can answer those questions. Come to God as a person, and He will teach you that He is a person and He is truth. And let that extend. And that is going to radically change that expression of who He is. And so it would clear up any of the confusion. It would cause separation of black and white. Are you my follower or are you not? And truth is the only thing that can do that. It's ironic that we say, but we will not define truth as a society. So, well, we'll end. Oh, go ahead, Faith. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, well, then nobody can hear you. I'll echo it. It's the only way that truth can be evident. Because even if God did a radical change in my life and then left me to try to play that out, I couldn't. His life, His Holy Spirit has to actually be the extension. He is that truth as a person. I can't pull that off. I can't live like He did without Him living it through me. And that's so important with Christianity. And there again, A lot of people push him aside and try to play it out, and they can't, so they'll add philosophy, and it gets all twisted, and it gets distorted. He's just saying, it's simple. It's just me. I'm just going to live my life through you. And so then the whole exhortation is, then let's let him do that. That's how we came to know him. That's how the world is going to know him. That's the evangelistic message. It's what he had designed in the first place. Let's just do that. Let's not try to mess it up or cloud it up with anything else. And let's then fight for that and stand on that. So we'll go ahead and close in prayer. Lord, we thank you for the fact that you are the truth. That it is ironic that they don't want to know the truth, and therefore it's the one thing that they continue to search for, and they can't find it because they don't want to know the absolute truth, Lord. May your absolute truth not be some sort of a talking point. May it simply be a reality that is lived out through your followers, that you would through your Holy Spirit confirm what has happened to us, that we would grow into that, and we would just let that thing live through us. We would let you live through us. That the world, in its very definition of where it's planting itself, would have to take notice and come to a different conclusion if we simply let you, being the truth, live through us. So, Lord, keep our focus on that, not on trying to do anything other than that. Let anything else that we are involved with simply be an extension of you revealing that you are truth living inside of a human being. That God has come and has lived within the human race is such an amazing fact, but the world will refuse to accept that because it will radically change how they live life. As we leave this place, Lord, may your Holy Spirit continue to confirm that and play that out as we look not to anything else but to you to be the teacher, a hands-on experiencing where knowledge becomes experiential. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.